When one thinks about Fantomas, la Amenaza Elegante, the elegant threat, the elegant menace, one does not associate the word fear with him. He is dauntless, quite intelligent, curious, extremely brave. He is an aristocrat, or at least carries himself as one, but he is quite democratic in his values. His adventures are many, saving the world countless times from his residence in Paris. He has associates who assist him. They are women, named after the zodiac. He has a mentor, Semmel, who advises him continuously. Fantomas is a cultured man, an intellectual man, and yet he comes across as every man, while being many men at once. He may strike fear among his enemies, but he himself does not suffer from it. Except maybe one time that I'm aware of. And the enemy is really himself. And this is the story I'm going to briefly discuss with you all. I'll read you the title in a moment, but those of you who know Spanish can see it. Fantomas is having this nightmare where he's being pursued by a shadow. And he finds a woman, and he finds refuge in her. And normally Fantomas does not do that. He wakes from his dream, which he's been having weeks and weeks on end. He discusses it briefly with his assistants. Again, women who are named after the zodiac. This is Libra. And this is Virgo. And she wants him to contact him with his mentor, Semmel. He goes to see him, tells him what his problem is, and wants Semmel to help him. You see, Semmel is a genius. He knows just about every science and art that one can know. And he's also a psychiatrist. But Semmel says, I can't help you. You need someone who's just smarter than I am. And of course, when Thomas says, there's no one smarter than you, and I'm not going to discuss my more intimate thoughts with just anybody. Semmel has a time machine, and he says, I can take you back in time to meet the greatest psychoanalyst of his time, maybe of any time, Sigmund Freud. So he transports to the last hours of Sigmund Freud's life in 1939, where Sigmund Freud is dying of cancer in London. He appears to Freud. Now Freud thinks this is some kind of either nightmare that he's having, or some kind of neurosis, because it's the last hours of his life. And Fantomas tells him his truth, tells him who he is. And even Freud even thinks, are you deaf? But Freud just goes along with it. Again, it's the last moments of his life, and he talks with Fantomas. And he asks him questions, his earliest memories. Fantomas remembers being with an aunt, playing along the docks, looking for his mother, who's not there for some reason. And he's trying to think of the earliest memories of his mother and of his father. And he tells Freud that his mother disappeared at one point and his father was in jail. And prior to her disappearance, the mother would visit the father in prison. He ended up in an orphanage. And as he can recall, he always wore his mask. And when Freud asked him, can you think of your youth, of your infancy? Fantomas says, I just know stories of my infancy. Some people say I was son of the devil. Others say I was found on the River Seine by a baron and a baroness. And even then I had my mask on. And I was cared for them for a brief moment before I ran away, stealing all their jewels. Because Fantomas, although he is a hero, enjoys stealing precious jewelry, precious artifacts. Something he's never been able to control. Freud finds this very curious about him as well, and he continues to question Fantomas. And he says, in this dream, who is this woman you see? And he goes, I don't know who this woman is in my dream. I've never seen her before, but I find security in her. And in the story, Freud goes into the history of psychoanalysis and how people looked at dreams, how the Greeks looked at it as something, as prophecy and such. But Freud really basically agrees that it's just part of the mind, trying to explain things we're repressing or things we just have trouble understanding about ourselves. And Freud finally just tells him, the shadow you see is your father, and the woman is your mother. And the fact that you have this obsession about stealing beautiful objects has always been your way of trying to retrieve your mother. And your father should not be a threat. So now that you know why you have this proclivity to steal these precious artifacts, now if you do so, you do with your conscience knowing that you're doing them, knowing why. Well, before you didn't. But now if you take them, you're doing it just to take them. Well, Fantomas thanks him. And shortly after, Freud dies. And it's in London, 1939. He returns back, tells Selma what has happened, meets with his assistants, and finally goes to bed and sleep. The first sleep he's had. And he dreams. And again the shadow appears, chasing after him. But he's no longer afraid of the shadow, and the woman he recognizes as his mother. And he turns to the shadow and says, "You are my father. I do not fear you." And he comes to terms with the loss of both of them. It's not clear whatever happened to them. This is from 1978. And it says, Fantomas, el día que Fantomas se psicoanalizó con Freud. The day Fantomas was psychoanalyzed by Freud. I have picked Fantomas as my value stamp for Terence's value stamp collection, with the substantial help of a friend of mine. We put this together. Fantomas. And I'm grateful to my friend who helped me with this. And thank you, Terence, for allowing me to be a part of this. Have a good day or night, and enjoy your dreams.